Tonight, finding a balance between housing and heritage.
An important step to be able to preserve the historic fabric of Toronto's main streets.
How these historic buildings are now one step closer to being a 76-story tower, and what heritage preservation experts say needs to be included in the plan.
I'm from Northern Ontario, and I love the heat.
I absolutely hate the heat here in Toronto.
Plus, love it or hate it, the heat is hanging around. We'll show you how people are coping with the extreme weather.
And now I have nowhere to go. And my heart will break in August.
And the cutback for autism supports, why a major center is scaling back, and what the province is saying about it. Good evening, I'm Chris Glover. After months of hearing about how building more housing was a universal #1 issue in Toronto, tonight a move to mix heritage buildings with a new mega tower leaped over an important hurdle. The city's Planning and Housing Committee approving a designation plan that even some heritage experts say is the right move. Tyler Cheese has our top story tonight.
Many of the buildings along this stretch of Yonge Street have been listed on the city's heritage registry for a while. Today, a city committee made their official heritage designation one step closer.
It's an important step to be able to preserve the historic fabric of Toronto's main streets.
So you can see the buildings marked for designation behind me. The plan is to preserve the exteriors and incorporate them into a new 76-story multi-purpose tower.
The facades will be retained. When you're on the streetscape, you will see that heritage that is characteristic of many parts of Yonge Street. But we are also going to add hundreds of new housing units on those sites.
The chair of the Housing and Planning Committee says he wants to see more development like this that merges the city's past with much-needed housing infrastructure.
Heritage can be an asset to these buildings, new developments when it's done well, when it's done thoughtfully.
And heritage preservation experts agree.
Development and heritage are not mutually exclusive.
She says it's important for the city to find a balance between heritage and more housing.
I think they balance it really carefully. They look at the needs within the area, at the heritage attributes, the list of things before them of the heritage value, both of the built form, but also the larger character area or streetscape or cultural heritage landscape.
But incorporating historic elements into a new build isn't always an easy task.
There's a number of things to consider. We start generally through a process of evaluation, understanding what the historic attributes of the building are, understanding the existing condition of the building.
He says there are many ways to approach a project like this.
You've probably seen a series of structural beams holding up an existing facade. That's one methodology. There's other variables that exist depending on a multitude of considerations. Let's say, for example, dismantling and rebuilding portions of a structure.
The official designation will be reviewed by City Council later this month. Tyler Cheese, CBC News, Toronto.
The extreme heat that we've been feeling since yesterday isn't going anywhere yet. It was another hot one today, and tomorrow will be more of the same. And while some like these temperatures, for those who work outside, it is not only hard to manage, it can even be dangerous. Dale Manukduk has that story.
Another day, another heat warning.
I absolutely hate the heat here in Toronto. I'm from BC, so our weather is so much more fresher there. The air is so much more open. Toronto's humid here.
What I don't like is cold. I'm from Northern Ontario, and I love the heat.
Well, there's plenty of that going around this week. Temperatures in the low 30s again today, with the same expected tomorrow.
It's just like hanging out in God's frying pan, that's all it is.
Dylan Scott is helping block off one end of this construction zone, who've been at it since 7 in the morning. Holding the fort on the other end is Debbie Cole.
I get a face cloth and I wet it at night, and then I put it in a baggie and then I freeze it. And then every now and then I'll get it out of my lunch bag and wipe my face with it, and it cools me right down.
All cooling strategies are welcome, especially for people working outdoors who are more susceptible to heat-related illness like exhaustion or worse, stroke.
Heat stroke is a medical emergency, so if you're outside or someone with you is feeling tired, flushed, sweaty, confused, that's a sign that you need to seek help immediately.
I like the cold because you can layer, and when you have extreme heat, you can't really shed your skin. So,
Reed Oliver says he's used to all types of extreme weather conditions and slows down during heat waves like this. In the end, though, he does prefer the higher temps.
Some days I like the sun and the birds chirping and the singing and that kind of stuff. It makes you kind of feel a little bit better than having to put on 20 pounds worth of clothing.
You might not have to this winter with warmer conditions expected.
El Niño is a natural phenomenon that
the World Meteorological Organization is keeping a close eye on El Niño conditions that have developed for the first time in 7 years.
El Niño is what we call a warming of the sea surface temperature somewhere in the eastern part of the equatorial Pacific Ocean. But as a result of El Niño, there is an influx of temperature in the atmosphere, which as a result increase the overall temperature on the planet.
Monday and Tuesday were the two unofficial hottest days in human record keeping, and 2016 was the world's hottest year on record, which coincided with El Niño. The World Meteorological Organization forecasts a 90% chance that this El Niño event will continue for the second half of 2023 and will be of at least moderate strength. It also predicts a 98% likelihood that one of the next 5 years and the 5-year period as a whole will be the warmest on record, breaking those numbers from 2016. Dale Manukduk, CBC News, Toronto.
All right, so let's check in on God's frying pan now. Still 27 degrees out there tonight as we look live at the city's skyline. Colette Kennedy is here with me now. And Colette, another stinking hot day expected tomorrow.
Yes, Chris, the oppressive heat continues, as does, of course, our heat warning to go along with this, with daytime highs 29 to 34. And it's not just those temperatures, of course, it's how it feels, those humidex values pushing towards 40. And even in the overnights, we're looking at temperatures that are around 20. So there's some relief, but not a lot for sleeping conditions or anyone certainly who's outdoors, doesn't have the benefit of air conditioning or working outdoors and such. So we got another day to get through like this. Looking at some of the daytime highs, how about the nation's capital at 33 degrees? Lots of readings at 30 or a little bit above there. And that led to a bit of activity kind of bubbling up, a few thunderstorms that sort of petered out, at least the ones that were west of the GTA. But tomorrow we've got a cold front that's going to be moving in. Now along that, we will see more organized rain and thunderstorms developing. So that's into tomorrow afternoon and evening. We'll have the risk of some of these being on the stronger side. But take heart, once we get that front rolling through, then we'll get into some relief as we head towards Friday. So another day of this, overnight tonight 20, tomorrow high of 30, feeling closer to 38, Chris.
My goodness. All right. Thank you, Colette. Now to a developing story this evening. A young girl has life-threatening injuries after being hit by a car in the Junction.
The driver who actually struck the child remained on scene, and Toronto is actually investigating. Our Toronto Traffic Services are actually investigating the incident.
The collision happened near Dundas Street West and High Park Avenue late this afternoon around 4:30. Police say the victim is under 10 years old and was hit in the crosswalk. There's no word on charges at this point, but police say the driver is cooperating. To Oakville, where a man is dead after falling from the 11th story of an apartment building. The unit the man was in was on fire at the time, and Greg Ross spoke with residents who saw what happened.
I heard glass shattering and somebody calling for help, like screaming for help.
It happened just after 5 o'clock this morning in this high-rise apartment building on Queen Mary Drive in Oakville. Many residents were woken up by the commotion and discovered an horrific scene when they looked outside. A man was dangling from this 11th floor apartment, which appeared to be on fire.
I watched him dangle there, kicking, trying to get back in the window, I suppose. There was smoke billowing out of the window, like a black and white smoke.
I ran on my balcony.
This man says he lives in the unit directly above the one that was on fire.
He was dangling from his bedroom window and his arms on the ledge. And there was so much smoke coming out of the window because it was broken.
Witnesses say it all happened very quickly, and there was little that anyone could do to help the man.
I kept watching for about 2 minutes, hoping that he would hang on for somebody to get there or for the firefighters to arrive to help him somehow, but he fell and hit the ground.
Emergency crews arrived here on scene within minutes. Paramedics attempted to revive the man before he was taken away in an ambulance.
He was rushed to hospital. Unfortunately, he has since been pronounced deceased. The fire was put out by Oakville Fire and was contained to the one unit, so we don't have any other reports of injuries or deaths.
The Ontario Fire Marshal has been called in to investigate, along with the Halton Regional Police Criminal Investigation Unit. They're still trying to determine what caused this fire and anything else that led up to this man falling to his death. Greg Ross, CBC News, Oakville.
An update tonight to the Ontario Place story we've been following for weeks. You'll remember the province is in the middle of a controversial redevelopment plan for the tourist destination. It includes a private spa. And now we've learned the spa was exempt from an initial environmental assessment of the overall plan. Lorenda Redekop explains.
The western tip of Ontario Place, just one section not included in this new environmental report, looking at the potential impacts of development. Nothing in the shaded areas are considered, all set to be in private hands.
The environmental assessment doesn't include the obliteration of the West Island and every living thing that's here. It doesn't include the destruction of the 850 trees and the habitat for beaver and mink and 113 bird species.
That's what he believes will happen with the development plans by the spa company Therma. The company has faced months of criticism, public land being turned over to a private company. Therma has said its plans include a wetland innovation zone, so the lake water around the development would be clean enough to provide new habitat for wildlife. MPP Chris Glover is frustrated that the Ford government changed the rules on environmental assessments shortly after it first came to power.
To exempt projects like Therma, like Live Nation, from environmental assessments. So any private project that's on government land is exempt.
However, based on what the report did assess, it finds the development will have a net benefit on the physical environment. At the same time, the city is still looking at what it might do, as it owns water and a strip of land at Ontario Place. This report mentions that, and that if the city doesn't agree to hand over its property, the province will have to expropriate it. The report also notes that most species of birds fall under the Migratory Birds Convention Act, which means the federal government could get involved. In a statement, the province says it received a strong mandate to build Ontario, including revitalizing Ontario Place. Lorenda Redekop.
Welcome back. The largest children's treatment center in the province is cutting back on its autism supports. Erin Oak Kids says it is not required to provide fee-for-service autism programs and can't afford to keep them going. Parents, meantime, say they are being left stranded. Talia Ricci has that story.
Maria Garrido's 8-year-old son Max is nonverbal. As a child with profound autism, he hasn't been able to attend school, but has found a place he feels safe and surrounded by community at Erin Oak Kids. Soon, the core clinical services he receives there will come to an end.
And now I have nowhere to go. And my heart will break in August when the last day comes and my profound child who does not understand why he can't go back through those doors.
Core clinical services include applied behavior analysis, speech-language pathology, and occupational therapy. The center's website says it serves more than 20,000 children and youth with disabilities and their families each year, including providing autism services. In the spring, the center announced it would be winding down its fee-for-service autism programs, which are paid for by families.
These families who see their regional center as the community hub will have nowhere to go.
We're struggling. We need the support for our children, and it's just not there. And having Erin Oak gone, it's just a shock. It is just a visceral, feeling of nausea and chest pain. And it's what are we going to do?
In a statement, Erin Oak Kids says it's not required to provide fee-for-service autism programs and that the decision was made because it couldn't recover the costs associated with delivering the service or staff it sufficiently. Adding, children with autism will continue to receive high-quality, evidence-based clinical support through the programs Erin Oak Kids is funded to provide, including diagnostic assessment, entry to school, caregiver-mediated early years programming, and urgent response services.
The centre is provided with over $100 million of government funding. For its part, the province says agencies are responsible for their own governance and operations.
For an agency as large and as established as Erin Oak, to say that they won't be offering the core services of the program was really quite shocking to me. But the little kids grow up and they continue to have needs. What we need is agencies that are willing to meet that need and provide the core services of the Ontario Autism Program.
Parents say years-long wait lists make it challenging for them to find a new place for their kids to access the support they need.
If they can't sustain this, no one will. It's just going to mean like our children are going to wait. They're going to stagnate. They're not going to reach their full potential.
Talia Ricci, CBC News, Toronto.
Report cards have been handed out by the Toronto Region Board of Trade grading transit systems in southern Ontario. The TTC scored a B, but riders say there is still plenty of room for improvement.
It's frustrating is that I felt that they had cut services during the pandemic, and then even though as people shifted back to work, they did not reflect that increase.
It's sort of like 50-50. I could get on the subway and get to where I need to be on time, or there's a delay.
So taking all of that into account, the report scored Toronto's transit system as the least reliable in the region. It says the TTC was only on schedule about 58% of the time. Suggestions from the report include expanding express bus services, adding streetcar routes, addressing safety issues, and integrating fares with GO Transit. Improving the TTC is a top issue for Olivia Chow. Toronto's next mayor will be sworn in 1 week, and until then, she is previewing her priorities. Ali Chiasson spent the day taking a closer look.
Thank you for the time.
Today's meeting is about harnessing the power of working together, says new Mayor Olivia Chow before she officially takes power at City Hall.
United Way have managed to bring together the private sector, BMO, Aecon, and many other companies, Danielle's, who's a developer, together with community service agencies and also the local tenants, so that they could together lift up the livelihood and create economic opportunities for people living in this community.
This community is the Golden Mile in Scarborough, which is slated to undergo major redevelopment soon, bringing over 70 residential towers, which will include, quote, deeply affordable housing, which is a concept Mayor Chow says needs to be well defined.
Right now, for example, 80% of market, it's not affordable for a whole lot of people.
This meeting is centered around housing in a time when the city is in a homelessness crisis. Asylum seekers can't even get shelter and are living on the streets. While the federal government plans to invest $175 million in settlement services, Chow says it more urgently needs federally funded housing as the number of refugee claimants grows.
The federal government is not paying a cent right now for refugees' housing.
She follows that up with,
I want to remain hopeful. I want to remain optimistic to say that the federal government and the provincial government will come to the table.
And that's where the real work begins.
All the money that she needs to fix housing and transportation, she doesn't have it. She won't have it. The province and the feds have it. So yes, go and talk to communities, go and do all of this. This seems nice, but it won't move the needle.
It's also when she'll be judged on deliverables.
It's very easy to know how our housing problems became housing problems. And most of it is because of a lack of action and not building enough affordable housing, not building enough purpose-built rental housing. Can she be the mayor who just doesn't announce projects that will be completed long after she's gone? The preferred approach for her would be to say, next year you're getting this, the year after you're getting this, and by the time I'm going to run for re-election or resign or retire, this will be happening.
For now, what'll be happening is more stakeholder meetings like these.
I know it's another week before I get sworn in, but there's so much to do. There's so much to learn.
Ali Chiasson, CBC News, Toronto.
Welcome back. All right, let's get back to Colette now for a final look at weather, and heat is certainly the overriding theme for what we are dealing with this week. Hey, Colette?
Well, Chris, in conditions like this, I know that we have our own ways of explaining it or how we would describe it, but there actually is a chart that we look to when we're talking about Humidex values that are up there around 40. So at the top of the show, I was talking about the heat warming in place, and when we look at ours, 30 to 39, some discomfort, but you know, we're closer to that 40, and you get into a situation where we have much greater discomfort, difficulties breathing, especially anyone who's vulnerable, the younger, older, and we really do need to avoid exertion if you do need to be out there, and if you can limit it to the earlier morning hours or later evening. But even the overnights, we have these warm norm temperatures, right? So drinking lots of water, not waiting until you're feeling thirsty and dehydrated, just kind of keeping that going throughout the day. Cool showers, we know that, wearing loose clothing, trying to get out of the sun, and don't leave pets or humans in cars, certainly in this kind of heat. As we look ahead, we do have a cold front that's coming in tomorrow, and as that does, behind it will be some relief from the extreme heat into Friday, but it provides a trigger or a lift for some showers and thunderstorms to develop, especially when we have very humid air in place. It's more buoyant. And so that moisture content means we could have areas locally with some heavier downpours. We'll be watching for any stronger storms that may develop here. There's a moderate risk of that timing. Now we're into the later afternoon, but you'll likely be seeing some of this even towards the lunch hour in southwestern Ontario. And then it rolls out. It will take some of the cloud cover with it too. And that's why through Friday, we'll see improving conditions through the day and those dew points coming down, so it gets a bit more comfortable. And looking at overnight temperatures, this is 1 a.m., okay? Still some readings in the low or mid-20s. Then towards 5, 6 a.m. tomorrow, we drop down, but still Toronto, an overnight low of 20. Windsor 21, and the nation's capital 21, and you see all those numbers in between as well. So we do this again tomorrow, 30 for the high, feeling like 38. Then Friday, 27, still some humidity, but only feeling like we're in the low 30s. So it is more comfortable, closer to seasonal, and looking pretty good into that weekend as well, Chris.
Yeah, loving the weekend. Just have to get through tomorrow. Thank you, Colette. And thank you for watching. That's our show for tonight. Marivelle Tarouk has your next local newscast tomorrow at 6, and I will see you back here tomorrow night at 11. Have a great night, everyone.